On this edition of the Mountaineer Report, we are going to talk about the past and also the present and future of the West Virginia Mountaineers. I am Mike Asti, and that is Ethan Bock, and this is another episode of the Mountaineer Report brought to you by WV Sports Now. Click subscribe. Find us on YouTube. You will soon be able to find us everywhere you get your podcasts, and hit up our coverage at WV Sports Now. And before we get to the current Mountaineers and what I'm covering at fall camp, and we are going to talk about some freshmen that may have breakout years that we're looking at, that we are liking, what we are seeing from, and also some transfer players. So a lot of newcomers to the Mountaineers and what we expect out of them in 2024. But before we get to all of that, Ethan, we're going to talk about circa 2010 to 2018 and former WVU head coach Dana Holgorsen, who now is a consultant with TCU. He was introduced and he had a press conference that, we talked about it before going on air here. I think kind of just for some clicks for TCU. How often does a consultant get a press conference? But in that presser, he talked about when he was head coach of WVU, when he left the Mountaineers for the Houston job, if he regrets that, and went into a lot of his past. So, Ethan, you saw what he had to say. I know this was a little bit before your time, certainly as a student and maybe a WVU fan. It was the heartbeat of my time as a Mountaineer. Dana's still talking about WVU. Dana unveiling some things. Dana left for reasons.
Reasons. That's the key word that
Right.
that I think that's the mystery, but you can kind of read between the lines when he says reasons.
Right.
Coach, Dana Holgorsen's is a character. Everybody knows that. That's the reason why TCU had him talk to the media.
Right.
And to their media's credit,
Yep.
what is there much to ask other
I
than his
guess.
role and what he's actually going to be doing under Sonny Dykes? So
Yeah, let's talk about 6 years ago. Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
so
more interesting than now.
might as well just talk about his whole career because
Yeah.
you said it before the show. If he wrote a book, we would probably read it.
Oh,
It'd be that
100%.
interesting.
100%. I would read it and I would watch a 30 for 30 on Dana becoming WVU's head coach. And when I know about that whole drama and that scenario, to his tenure, to leaving, the whole thing, it would be a lit documentary.
But I also think on the other side, I think West Virginia and even the fan base had their reasons.
Yeah.
I think it was a perfect time for both parties to split, and West Virginia could move on to a new era with Neil Brown. Took a while to get that going, but now I think it's paid off. It especially determines what happens this season.
Yeah.
And then for
I
Dana,
mean, better than the Dana Houston tenure.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they had 1 year
Brown's still
where
kicking. Yeah.
they had 1 year with 12, 13 wins.
Yeah, they did.
At
Yeah,
Houston,
true.
but
Yeah. They peaked early on, and it made sense to bring Dana in to get them Group of Five to Big 12. Dana
Yep.
kind of knew that was going to happen, which is part of why I did take that job. So it wasn't necessarily going to a Group of Five from a major conference. He knew they were going to get in the Big 12. He was part of that deal. And they were good right away. They were really good as a Group of Five when they did hire him. They've absolutely dipped since. There's money there. They're splitting with a lot of other Texas schools. You figure they could be a good program in this new era, but it won't be with Dana. And some were surprised that they didn't let him linger on because he was the guy that they kind of brought in to do this. And they gave him time, though, and it just completely cratered with Dana. But I guess part of my takeaway, Ethan, and I know a lot about his hiring at WVU and the drama there, and obviously we could have a whole show on Bill Stewart and his exit, and a lot of drama, a lot of controversy involved in all of that. And then, of course, the Orange Bowl win kind of made everyone forget. Bill Stewart passes away. The Orange Bowl win. This is all around the same era there. The program kind of has a peak after the end of Rich Rodriguez and the way that ended. They do then dip a little back, but still an average of 7-8 wins a season. So it's better than even what the early days of Neil Brown was. And then he peaks again in 2010 or 2016 with 10 wins. He does get a second 10-plus win season in 2016. Their bowl tie-in wasn't great. They didn't win that, but still a 10-win year. Again, dipped back again, and then you see really a mutual divorce, even though he does technically leave the program. It wasn't going to last, as you mentioned. It wasn't going to last forever anyway. I know for a fact the program was kind of done with him. The fans were done with him. He was done. To be fair, he was sick of it too. I think he was sick of the fishbowl atmosphere where he was getting heavily scrutinized and he wanted to scream. We still had the Orange Bowl win, a record-setting bowl win, a conference title, the last one still for the program. And yeah, I just won 10 games a couple years earlier. Again, in comments he made about West Virginia kids, a lot of in-state fans hate him for that and will always hold that against him, etc. He's one of the most polarizing figures in WVU sports history, maybe right only behind Bob Huggins now, the way Huggins' tenure ended. And obviously Huggins achieved even more with the Final 4 year, etc., and what he means to the basketball program. And Dana was an outsider. Huggins was an insider, being from the area, WVU product, etc. Not the case for Dana. But it does feel a little different than if you remember leading up into the matchup. And part of this is Dale Wolfley just died. But there was a little bit of intrigue about obviously Brown versus Dana. It was in Houston. It wasn't in West Virginia. Dana did mention, I can't believe the Big 12 didn't put this in West Virginia first, which they dropped the ball because we're not going to get the reverse of it. But he also kind of toned it down once Dale Wolfley died, and he had a second presser before the game, if you recall, where he said, there's good people there. I knew Dale, respect to them all, let's just play football. It kind of went away. It feels like to me the first chance Dana got, and yes, it was a question, he didn't do it on his own, unprompted, he clearly still has some hurt feelings. Like, he didn't want to do it after a guy passes away, but clearly he's not over what happened at the end of his tenure at West Virginia. Clearly he's still in his feelings. He's still a bitter ex-girlfriend about it. And it didn't work out at Houston, and now he's at TCU, and who knows about his career from now on, and Sonny Dykes helped him out, but maybe he'll get another Group of 5 job or wherever in the future next year. It just screams to me that he is not over it, regardless of who is at fault or what really happened or all of that.
He's still talking about him. And even that's
Right.
even though TCU's media asked some questions about West Virginia, a couple questions.
Yeah.
He didn't have to go into detail or say
No, I mean,
he had his reasons for leaving. But yeah, but when you look at Coach Holgorsen's just coaching career,
yeah,
I don't think I don't think him going to Houston was bad for him at all. It was a nice settling point for him to coach 4 or 5 years there.
yeah.
And now he's settled in the Houston, Fort Worth area, and to the point where he could spend a year with Sonny Dykes and then just have a rebound and go to a Group of 5 school or work in the Power 5 level as an assistant.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of weird when you think about it, though. You're right, but it's an ego hit, you would imagine. This is a guy who lifted the Orange Bowl trophy not all that long ago, even though it seems like eons ago in our rapid every second sports culture. He did win a major conference title. He did win another 10, does have another 10-win season, and yet he might be an assistant on a Group of 5 in this era of college football. I mean, you're right, but that's swallowing some serious pride that I don't think I thought Dana Holgorsen would ever swallow in the midst of his WVU tenure, because he was kind of riding a little bit of an ego trip, some believed back then, certainly coming off the Orange Bowl win. I don't know how many coaches would swallow that kind of humble pie. To go from that to 15 years later, you're an assistant at a Group of 5.
He still has a lot. He could coach for a little bit still too. That's
yeah. He's young. He's not 80 years old. No,
yeah.
I mean, he could have plenty more years. If you're a Rice who's within the radius there in Texas, I would maybe look at him. That's still a Group of 5, throw up a lot of points, become interesting, get a lot more engagement on social media. People would care about you. We would write about what Dana said about West Virginia still 3 years from now or whatever the case may be, because he'll still be talking about it. I'm sure they'll ask him about it. That might make some sense. Houston's done, obviously, but hell, if SMU putters early on in the ACC, maybe they give him a call, because that's a Texas guy, and now they're in a major conference, and maybe he'd like sticking it to the Big 12 in a way by going to the other conference that's behind the SEC and Big 10. You don't know what's in Dana's mind. He probably doesn't want to leave the Texas area. This kind of doesn't work out for him now. Maybe he would also swallow some pride and do the Lane Kiffin thing, Ethan. Maybe Lane Kiffin swallowed some, joined Nick Saban's staff, with one big was on championship teams, and then was able to become a great head coach again. And now at Ole Miss, a major program, an historic program, and winning there, it resurrected everything for him. He did have to swallow his pride and be an assistant. Maybe Dana would do the same.
And he had to go to FAU too after that.
And yeah, head coach
So,
at FAU. Yeah, before Ole
but
Miss.
it paid off for Lane Kiffin. So
Yeah.
that's a perfect example of how Dana Holgorsen can rebound his career and get back into the Power 5 coaching range.
Yeah, he's not done by any means. Part of me wishes he maybe would be done talking about WVU, but he's not done coaching by any means. And he could have sat out this year, but I think also him being a consultant with his friend in a major conference now tells me he's addicted to this thing. He can't even sit out a year and collect all his money and look for a better job next year, whether it be a head coach or assistant. He's addicted to being part of meetings, scheming, running an offense, discussing offensive football, talking to QBs, figuring out how to beat a defense. He's addicted to it. He's a sicko of college football.
Yep.
And he's a Mike Leach disciple sicko, and that's a compliment to the great Mike Leach. So maybe this shows that. Like, he is a sicko. He would rather be a consultant at TCU than to sit at home with his millions of dollars. That's a sicko. So more power to him. He got many more years to go, and I'm sure more comments about WVU again. We could spend hours talking about his hiring at WVU, his tenure at WVU, and the end of his tenure at WVU. And if you really want to know it in full perspective, I did write about in the past on WV Sports Now. It's linked in the recent article there. I did give you the full quote of what he also said, because Ethan alluded to. He didn't just talk WVU. He brought up some jobs that he was offered and didn't take that would have changed the dynamic of college football the last 10 years. Dana, again, whenever Dana writes a book or there's ever a movie about him, I'm going to watch and I'm going to read. So let me know. We are now going to flip the script, though, and talk some present-day Mountaineers and Mountaineers that should also be a part of the future of this football program. They can actually look at the mural of Dana and the old Mountaineers on that Orange Bowl win when they leave this facility and get towards Milan Puskar Stadium. But Ethan, just from what you're reading, hearing around the program, our coverage, etc., are there any freshmen that stand out to you that you expect something from that have an impact this year? Because obviously there always are freshmen that stand out that eventually end up having an impact. It was a big one last year for freshmen, Jaheim White, Traylon Ray, etc. Who are some guys this year that maybe could be those guys for this year's team in Chosen 24?
Yeah, it seems like the coaching staff's high on Day Farmer.
Yeah.
I think that's the guy that can, especially with, we talked about the unknown of the wide receiver core is deep.
Yeah.
But the question is who's going to emerge, because they're going to need a couple guys to really emerge. And Day Farmer could have his opportunity early. I don't think it's going to be a case of he's going to have to take half the year to get settled and then he'll really start seeing snaps.
Right.
Just based on the way they're talking about him. It's close to what it was with CJ Donaldson 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Where and Day Farmer's not like an underrated recruit like CJ was.
No, Day was a diamond in many roughs, and he was a flip, and they got him from a rival, and Day went back and forth with UCF as well. It was a major coup. The program's still bragging about it, and that might be part of why they're going to unleash him early. They faced Pitt in week 3 before conference play. They flipped him from Pitt. Pitt really had him locked in, and we know from our colleagues who cover Pitt at Pittsburgh Sports Now within the family, that hurt Pitt. And that Pitt was really excited about getting Day at the time. So I would not be shocked as what you're kind of saying. You ease him in a little bit, maybe if not against Penn State, against Albany, you should be able to do you one in that matchup. And then there got to be a play deep probably to Day against Pitt to stick it to him. I would not be shocked if they're trying to gear up for that. And it would be different than how they handled Traylon Ray last year. He was a great receiver that was a top recruit with Gallagher. Gallagher didn't get much time. Traylon Ray eventually emerged, but it wasn't until midway through the year. I do think we see Day way earlier this season.
Yeah, and with the transfers they brought into a receiver, even Justin Robinson, also Jaden Bray. Those guys will play. It's it's just how much are they going to take away from a Day Farmer or Rodney Gallagher? It's just going to be interesting to see how they manage that, because
Yeah.
I think Bray and Robinson are going to play a lot.
You would imagine.
You would
Yeah. I mean,
imagine,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
Hudson
don't know.
Clement, we talked about, maybe is really the wide receiver one. He's the incumbent. Him and Green are friends. He really emerged last year.
Right now, yeah, I think
Yeah.
if we have to give an answer for wide receiver one, it's Hudson Clement.
Yeah.
But that could be a totally different answer in even a month from now.
Sure. And Preston Fox really gained favor with the program. He's a veteran. He's a local kid. He's going to obviously be used a lot on special teams and as a returner. We're not going to see that from Gallagher, as a spoiler for anyone who clicks on the article and didn't read it. He's not going to be used as a returner. Brown said look for him next year, maybe in that role after Fox leaves. We'll see if that hurts the recruitment and he has to worry about Gallagher potentially leaving and transferring if he doesn't get much playing time this year. But there's so much depth at receiver this year, and even more so than a year ago when it was just Devin Carter coming in as a veteran. They lost some players. They get Bray, they get Robinson, they get multiple major conference program transfers to come in. They bring in the whole group that was there last year that emerged to come back. And then Gallagher getting some time at nickel on the defense, which also is loaded in depth in the secondary that we talked about last show. So maybe that's also part of trying Gallagher out somewhere else, that they just know they got to use Day. It seems like the program knows there's talent there. They got to use Day and they want to use Day. So I would definitely expect them to use Day. You mentioned a couple of transfers already. Besides Day Farmer, I'll throw out Zay Jennings. He's somebody as a safety with the secondary that the program's talking about a lot. Neil Brown's talking about a lot. So is Jordan Leslie. I don't think he's going to make the impact of Day Farmer, of course. There's a lot of depth there, too. There's also transfers in Garnet Hollis, who the program seems to love and Brown seems to love and the coaches seem to love. Jaheim Joseph, who maybe they're not as high on from what I'm hearing and what it looks like there. Aiden Garnes is another one. Anything else, any other players, transfers, or freshmen that you can think of that stand out to you or you're hearing? Garnes was another one that coaches are really talking about a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna mention the secondary in general. It's a lot like the receiver core.
Yeah.
It's pretty deep on paper. I really like Aiden Garnes. Duquesne obviously played West Virginia last year, so if fans watch that 5-hour, 6-hour marathon of the game,
right, got home at 4 a.m. Yep.
They'll be familiar with Aiden Garnes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the two Northwestern transfers as well. They're obviously trying to find pretty much another Beanie Bishop, where it's transfers right in from another high major program. Will those guys be Beanie Bishop? Probably not. I mean, it's pretty hard to fill those shoes, but
yeah.
But that secondary core is so deep to the point where, like we talked about last show, Aubrey Burke's now playing a hybrid role. They're gonna have to get creative like that.
Yeah, and it may benefit Burks and show his versatility, but also it is part of the depth. They have a lot of depth at safety, at DB, at corner, all through the secondary. That, yes, you're losing the best guy in Beanie Bishop, who was a consensus All-American. You're not going to have anyone be that, I don't think, and that's not even probably their expectations. But overall, depth-wise, through the secondary and even the linebacker room, there might be more. They could deal with injuries better. You won't have a true freshman having to call plays and be the major guy in the linebacker room like a season ago. So that is a big deal. It's almost, I mean, again, this is not like they're going to go undefeated and romp things. I'm not sure I'm picking them to do anything in the Big 12. This could still easily be a 7-8 win team instead of a 9-10 win team. I'm not that high yet. I got to evaluate more and give you picks later on. But there's a lot more depth, whether it be freshmen, transfers, who's coming back. That's why this is the year that some are believing they could actually win a conference or truly contend for the playoff this year, because this is the year, more so than even next year will be when Green's gone, even with Jaheim still there. You have such an experienced group, and everybody is back, and most programs, Alabama down, lose key players every year. That's not what happened to West Virginia. This was really a great offseason that's very underrated nationally. So that's why you can argue they should be ranked in that top 25. That's why the program feels slighted that we talked about last show, because the depth, what they have coming back, and then who's also there. And I will throw out there, and I wrote about him a lot. Josiah Trotter. He was with the program last year, redshirted all year because he got hurt in the offseason. He has looked really, really good. He looks bigger than everybody else. He looks stronger than everybody else. He looks like he's been at the program 4 years, not one. He's going to have a serious impact, and he's a newcomer because you didn't see him on the field last year.
Yeah, and that adds to the linebacker core as well. That depth. Having Trey Lathan come back is huge.
Yeah,
it's a clear. But you're right. Like, I mean, yeah, Beanie Bishop and Zach Frazier, NFL guys, but
sure,
this was a really good offseason for West Virginia compared to the first few years just dealing with the portal.
Yeah, certainly in comparison. Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, you could argue that they're getting slighted in some of these national ranks when you look at all, and we didn't even get to, as we're getting close to rounding out the show, we didn't even get to TJ Jackson, who some believe is the best FCS transfer coming over to a program that could really help the D-line that also needs some depth. That might actually be the weakest part of the defense, amazingly enough, and that was supposed to be the deepest a couple years ago. Certainly was when the Stills brothers were there, but that might actually arguably be the weakest. But you do get some depth, and even the non-major additions are thought of as possible contributors to this team this year. And when you look at what happened with Hawkins last year, he was there 1 year, became very popular, did some dancing, made some plays, and that's kind of a reason why there can be belief that you can step up and have an impact right away from that level going to the Big 12. So there's reason for optimism. It's not crazy. There is legitimate reason for some optimism. Anyone else that we didn't get to here that you can think of? Go ahead.
It seemed like during the offseason, it seemed like Xavier Ballsy, offensive line transfer.
Yeah, okay.
That was a good pickup. I'm not worried about the line though this year. Even though they lose Frazier, I'm not too concerned about the line.
Yeah,
they had to play without him during the bowl game against North Carolina.
Frazier missed the bowl game. Yeah.
So moving guys around, like having Yates take over for Frazier now, and I'm not too worried about the line. So
yeah,
but I see why the program feels slighted. They, like you said, they bring back a lot of key pieces and off of a 9-win team. But I also see why some people aren't fully bought into this team yet. So
sure,
I think it's just more so making sure last year wasn't a fluke.
Yeah, and when you have one good year in 5, when your quarterback does only complete 52.9, even though he's saying it's going to be 65, you haven't seen it. It's only been 52.9 from what we've seen. We've seen a sophomore slump from CJ, from freshman sensation to kind of dipping a little bit and having a slide a few games last year. That could happen to Jaheim. There's reason also for the naysayers to say, I need to see more. These things could easily happen to the Mountaineers. It wouldn't be shocking if those things happen and they win 7 games instead of 9 or 10 again. It wouldn't be like anyone's blown away because a lot of these are swing games too. And you beat Penn State, you lose to Pitt, it kind of cancels each other out. So every week this is going to be a conversation, and they have the roster to be better, but nothing is a guarantee, especially not in this era. But this era also does give you a clear path that there is a direct path to the playoff. There's not a reason to debate. I mean, you can get into a debate if you don't take care of business, but if you do in conference play, you're in regardless. So that's also reason for motivation for this team. But as we talked about last show, I think it's probably good that they're getting slighted and they feel that motivation and they're going to hit the ground running and guns blazing the start of the year rather than kind of being comfortable with, okay, we got to kind of where we wanted to be and we got some respect. No, they're still getting disrespected after last year. And Reed Carrico, I'll throw out. We talked about him last show. He's another one. Jordan Leslie called him a depth piece. I think he could be more than that. He looks like a star to me. They got a lot of depth there in the linebacker room, though. And you kind of factor in Burks in that, too, because of the hybrid role. So we will see. I mean, a lot of these players that we're mentioning, because everyone wants to talk about, there's going to be a freshman that's going to do this, do that. It's always the case for Mountaineer teams, going back to Frazier under Brown, for sure. But as we talked about even off the air, Ethan, there's a lot more depth this year, so where's the room? If you believe this freshman's getting some touches or this transfer's getting touches, who's losing them? There's only one ball. There's only so many minutes in a game. There's only so many plays out there. The defense is trying too. it's not just pure arena football and you do whatever you want. This is not Dana Holgorsen. This is not his offense in this era where you can do whatever you want. And this is different. So everyone's not going to be able to be what everyone's saying they can be. Maybe next year that'll be the case. I do think Day Farmer is one that I can almost guarantee is going to have some kind of impact here, or at least an opportunity to make an impact where they go to him deep on a big play. They try something to him. He maybe doesn't convert. Maybe he's not ready, but I think they give it a whirl because there's tons of talent there and he looks really, really good right now. And as we've touched on with our coverage, it was a whole drama that kind of could be a recruiting movie on all the flipping, different things he's told me off the record about all of that. I'll tell you that even after he flipped and agreed to go to West Virginia National Signing Day, programs are still trying to flip him again. Like he's still being recruited now about next year. So are a lot of players that just this culture in basketball or football in this transfer portal era. So to get him is a major coup. To get him and have him still there is a big deal.
And you have to get creative nowadays with just touching on the transfer portal era. You have to appease everybody. You have to keep everybody happy. It's no longer a traditional college athletics scene where nobody would be worried about 10 guys leaving the team at the end of the season because they weren't happy. So the staff's got to get creative, and that's all around the country. It's not just West Virginia.
No, and that's also why the offseason was so great for the Mountaineers because they lost players, but to the NFL, they didn't have any major hits in the portal. Yeah, they lost players in the portal. Everybody did, but a lot of them are depth pieces. And they also added them from major conferences, and they also added them to key positions and a lot of talent. So that's part of the optimism this year. But yeah, I mean, you flip a guy in the past era and they're stuck. So there's no one else recruiting them like they're there or they're screwing themselves and sitting out. Not the case now. You flip them and 10 minutes later, you're still not confident about them. And it's probably part of why they're trying to figure out a way to get Rodney Gallagher the ball, whether it's offense, defense, somewhere, because you can't just let a guy develop. As Neil Brown likes to put a word, developmental program. It only goes so far. You can't be developing an NIL player who is a major 4-star recruit for 2+ years and just figure he'll linger around. I mean, those kids eventually are going to go look for some playing time. That'll do it for this edition of Mountaineer Report. A little longer, but we did have to open with some Dana talk. And I wanted to get some of the current program in too. So all our apologies. They won't all be this long, but I think it was a good show nonetheless. We did not touch on basketball on this show, but breaking news, they won again. They're doing well. It's a tour of Italy that they can toast to. So we will see what that does now to the next era of Mountaineer basketball under Darren DeVries, and even continuing the next era of the women's program under Mark Kellogg.